Hey guys, it's Levi. Welcome back to the buffet and to the continuation of my journey through From Software's Dark Souls series as a first-time player. In my previous video, I asked the question, is Dark Souls 3 the hardest FromSoft game? After playing it, the title still went to Elden Ring. That still stands, and yes, Sekiro will be the last game that I play, as I did not like it on my first playthrough, and from the comments section, most of you seem to think it's the hardest as well. But that remains to be seen, because we're here to talk about Dark Souls 2 and where it stands in the echelon of FromSoft. The black sheep of the internet, the misbegotten one, the one Miyazaki didn't direct. Yeah, I get it. I've been on the internet and I've seen your concerns, people. I've also learned that a lot of you complain for the sake of complaining when it's really not that bad. So how bad is it? Let's dive in and find out. Full spoiler warning for Dark Souls 2 as well, folks. That should go without saying. After jumping almost immediately from 3 to 2, I noticed a strange change that was hard to put my finger on. I quickly realized that this game does not control the same as 3, as though we had gone a step backwards. Instead of having freeform movement from the joystick, I felt like my character now moved on a more limited 8 directions of the joystick, stiff and rigid in turning radius. In 3, a quick 180 felt smooth and modern. 2 already felt like it suffered from older tech. Is this a reason why it's harder? Well, it very well adds to the reasons, that's for sure. With the tutorial, there was no boss waiting for me with a hard lesson, which was, I'll admit, a bit jarring for a FromSoft game. But nevertheless, I found myself in the main hub world almost immediately, Majula, a quaint little coastal town overlooking the vast ocean. It's a nice change from the Firelink Shrine, which felt damp and dark. Majula is bright and warm, giving the player a sense of hope. That's nice because sunshine and hope aren't common in these games. I quickly meet up with our main firekeeper Shroen, stoic and vague as usual. She gives you your Estus flasks with 2 measly charges. With minimal setup required, I start off exploring. What's interesting about Majula is that it's essentially the center of an X, with 4 directions to choose from. You can tackle a few directions at first, but there is a correct direction to take. And don't bother with the hole, that's for later. I like the idea of giving a player a choice as to where they go first. I've heard Dark Souls 1 also did this, so we'll see. Dark Souls 3 already feels far more linear in terms of where the story heads. Can't really mess with that aspect. Dark Souls 2 lets you learn pretty quickly where you are quote-unquote allowed to go, or which is the correct direction. I head into the Forest of Fallen Giants, as it seems fairly obvious this is the correct way. The Estus flask is bare bones at the start, so God help you if you take too much damage. I found I died quite a lot at the start. Already, 2 feels far more punishing in every aspect. Alongside having your Estus flask, Dark Souls 2 introduced life gems, another option as a means to heal. These help make up for what I feel is the next design choice that felt like a punishment, actually using your Estus flask. In 3, using it had you slow down a little, but its effects were almost instant and you still had some mobility. In 2, you are deadlocked into an animation and it takes what seems like a split second longer to work, leaving you open for attacks at all times. This is definitely a punishment, and I would argue adds to the difficulty overall. It's one thing to take damage, it's a whole other thing to take more damage just to try to heal from the first hit. You can't spam your Estus willy-nilly and get back into the fight like in 3 so seamlessly. The life gems make up for this issue by not locking you into such a stiff animation. Instead of getting a huge chunk of health back, you get a gradual recovery over a short amount of time. So you still need to play defensively, but you don't get punished by losing mobility. There are also tiers of life gems, so using the larger versions not only works faster, but heals more health. These are rare to find, so I tended to hold on to them for the really tough fights. All in all, life gems became my go-to heal option, and I would hoard them any chance I could, holding on to 50 plus at a time in the endgame. Spamming them also stacks the effects, so you'll need a ton as you burn through them all the time. Already, these changes to health regen and Estus puts Dark Souls at a harder difficulty than 3, and I haven't even begun to play the game. And before I can even talk about any bosses, enemies, or even the environment, I need to address the one issue with Dark Souls 2 that the internet loves to talk about. This little old stat called adaptability. Huh, that's weird. That wasn't a stat in Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, or Elden Ring. Must not have been that important, right? Wrong. This one stat will make or break your entire playthrough and show you at the beginning that something feels terribly off while you're taking damage. In short, for the uninitiated, the adaptability stat essentially controls agility, which in turn increases your iframes. In their other games, your iframes are just included and they are what they are. When you dodge, you're invisible for a second or two, depending on the attack animation. It dictates the entire game's playstyle, and for the most part, a system no player is actually going to debate or think about. Except in Dark Souls 2, where you need to invest in this bizarre stat to increase the length of your iframes. Madness. Utter, bizarre madness. If you're a first-time player and you are not aware of this, you are going to find you are being borked from unholy distances and what feels like a ridiculously unfair hitbox. Even perfectly timed dodges will feel frustrating as you're clipped time and time again for what feels like no reason. This stat alone changes the entire game, and I now understand why it was removed from all their other games going forward. It's bad, and we all know it. With all that being said, the player needs to ensure that their adaptability/agility stat is sitting around 100 for you to have any chance of feeling normal. Anything higher is a waste of stat points. But if you didn't know this one key feature, this game would have probably also sucked for you. Alright, with that all out of the way, the start of the game is brutal for this reason. You won't have enough levels to even come close to getting that stat up, so you're going to be wrecked by swings that should not be an issue. You will need to just suffer through this until you've hit the correct adaptability level, so early game enemies can be devastating. Now, back to the Forest of Giants. After trudging your way through the castle and doing ye old dungeon loop, killing enemies, getting tricked into traps, and dying at least a few times, you'll finally make it to the bottom of the castle where you can fight your first actual boss, the last giant. He's big, slow, and lanky. He looks menacing, but he's actually laughably easy. They also let you summon not one, but 2 spirits for this fight, so I went in with some good confidence. Even without the summons to help, this guy is a pushover. If you fought anything large in any Souls game, you know the routine. Hang in his feet, watch for stomps, and
hack the bone! Hack the bone!
Whoa! This fight was over before I could even get my bearings. Mostly due to my summon friends. So far, so good. He drops the soldier key, and I'm free to continue through the castle. That boss was your first boss, but he wasn't your real first boss encounter. That honor goes to the huge knight known as the Pursuer. He's large, fast, and has what feels like an impossible to dodge swing. You can blame that on your low adaptability stat. When I first encountered him, I questioned if this little venture through this game was even worth it. He can close the gaps instantly, swing wide, and take you down in about 1 or 2 hits. He also has a stupid amount of health, making this fight seem nigh impossible. Also, there is no one to summon for this fight, so it's just you and him. Well, it turns out there is a method that you can use that helps make this fight much easier. There are 2 ballistas sitting at the back of the arena. Most players would think this is just set dressing, but they are actually functioning units that can be used against the Pursuer. Unfortunately, he can one-hit them and they're destroyed instantly. The trick is to enter the arena, bait him into swinging down to the front end, sprint past him, load the ballista. If he's lined up, unload and remove almost half of his health. If, and I mean a big if, you manage to stun lock him, you can reload and fire again and take his health to almost nothing. If you can do this a 3rd time, he dies and you didn't have to engage at all. After many attempts, my ideal situation was 2 strikes and I had to finish off the fight with melee combat. This battle was so tense, and he's one of the earliest bosses in the game. If this is how the game is going to go, I am dreading this experience. After what seemed like hours? Days? I don't know, endless time fighting this dude, I finally beat him, found some sweet loots, and decided to rest in a lovely bird nest on the top of the tower. As you do. I was whisked away to the next major area, the Lost Bastille. At this point, I started to notice that the environment is what makes Dark Souls 2 hard. There are more ways to fall off ledges than anything I found in Dark Souls 3. You have to be an idiot to die from environmental hazards in 3. But in 2, I feel like they specifically designed these locations with the intent that not only are the enemies going to be everywhere, but you're going to have to walk into so many traps and cheap tiny ledges, you'll want to throw your controller. Anytime you enter an area that's open with a chest, be wary. That's 100% a trap. Oh, nice, a chest after that terrible bomb room. Sweet. I'm just going to go, oh god, it's the Pursuer, he's back, what the hell? Really? It's bad enough that you forced me to fight him as a first boss fight, but then to bring him back almost immediately in the next area as a random normal enemy? Come on now, that's just cruel. Even with the Pursuer around every bloody corner of this place, the Bastille has loads of chances for you to be blown up at any time. It's littered with explosive barrels around every corner. One bad swing from an enemy, and it's back to the bonfire for you. There will be no speed running through locations in this game. The Bastille will be sure of that. If you've managed to get through the winding hallways and prison cells, you'll finally have a route from the bonfire to the boss fight. This run back has you fight at least 10 knights who can and will mess your shit up and must be removed for you to even have a chance of getting to the boss wall. Joy. At least they let you summon 2 people for the fight as well. And, to add insult to injury, this is your first gank fight. You will need your 2 summons just to make this fight fair. If you were someone who didn't take them into the fight and you went alone, without that help, you're amazing. I am not putting up with that bullshit. The Bastille has another take on the Bell Gargoyles from the first game. You know, where you fight 2 at once. Good times. You know what would make the fight even better? Fighting 5. Sure, why not? Oh, don't take too long though, because these guys will just keep coming based on a timer, not damage. So if you're too slow, or God forbid, just trying to dodge attacks and stay alive, more gargoyles will show up. Again, having your summon companion is a must in this fight, because this shit is not cool alone. At this point, even without beating the game, Dark Souls 2 has proven to be way harder than 3. What other joys await me? How many more gank boss fights are there? And before we even talk bosses, I want to talk about what I think is the main reason Dark Souls 2 is actually the hardest Souls game. It's the level design and environmental layout. It does not mess around. As time goes on, each new area is almost worse than the last. Every new zone has some environmental-based gimmick that is solely designed to troll the player. As I mentioned before, the last Bastille has endless exploding barrels and rampart ledges so narrow you're gonna fall off. Hyde's Tower of Flame is nothing but destroyed paths that are easy to roll off of. The Shaded Woods is full of giant pots that cause insta-kill status effect just by standing near them, and the pots are literally everywhere. It took me too long to realize you could just roll smash them down to remove them. I was simply running past them trying not to die. Did I mention I'm not the smartest? Also, all the enemies are ghosts, so lock-on's not possible. You just gotta swing and hope to God it connects. Brightstone Cave's Saldora is just one big arachnophobia theme park. Sure, there aren't a lot of hazards here, but come on, it's endless giant spiders. Nope. Doors of the Pharos is littered with hundreds of false doors, tricking you into figuring out which ones have the path and items in them. And you only have a few of the keys in the whole playthrough. It's insane.
Check this out. Won't open. Won't open. Not this one. Not this one. None of them open.
The gutter is a charming place where it's pitch black all the time. You need to traverse the rickety wooden structures, lighting beacons along the way just to see where you're going, all while trying not to fall to your death or be one-shot by statues that fire poison darts at you. At the bottom, if you manage to reach it that is the Black Gulch. The Black Gulch is a relatively short area, but it's nothing but those statues that shoot poison blobs with lethal accuracy. It's almost impossible not to get hit by at least 5 of these statues before you even make it to the boss door. Yes, there is a bonfire close by the boss door, but it's a secret, and I didn't find it without the help of the internet. Again, trolling level design. Are you starting to see a pattern here? I haven't even spoken about the bosses in this game yet, because for the most part, you're almost always given 1 or 2 summon friends to help in a fight. I will talk about bosses, but before that, we need to address the thing everyone loves to hate in every Souls game: the poison swamps. Miyazaki's most beloved child. Dark Souls 2's version of the poison swamp is the epitome of frustrating. Pits that, if you fall into, have 0 visibility, filled with poison gas, making it impossible to find the ladder out. If you fall in, you're dead. Goodbye whatever souls you had, they belong to the swamp now. Every jar throughout this area is, you guessed it, filled with poison. If you happen to smash even one, there's a high chance you'll get poisoned. And there are pots everywhere. There are poison pools, poison fog, even the boss arena is filled with poison. Remember when I said in my last video that the poison swamp in Dark Souls 3 was the worst? It's not. This place is. It's an insane windmill of poison death. I had mentioned that the boss fight in this place was also in an arena filled with ankle-high poison water. I was shocked they made a major boss fight this cheap. My first attempt was pretty much just me laying down into the fetal position and crying because, how? What? Who thought this was a good idea? This isn't even fair. If you spend enough time traversing this funhouse of death, it is possible to find 2 people who can be summoned to help in the fight. Seeing as summons aren't affected by poison, it would seem, my thinking was, this has to be the way to beat this fight, right? So after spamming enough life gems to offset the poison that was killing me, I rushed the boss with my summons so fast that I brute forced my way through the fight. I'm not even sure if I lived after and had to just collect my souls after the battle, but geez, what a sadistic nightmare. Well, it turns out this windmill you're located in, it's what's pumping the poison water and fog in. Sure, makes sense. But what the game doesn't tell you in any fashion whatsoever is that you can disable the poison by, get this, using your lit torch and setting the windmill gears on fire, thus removing the poison from the boss arena, making it just a normal boss fight. Are you kidding me, Dark Souls? How did anyone figure that out without some random chance of standing near the gears 2 floors below with a lit torch and being in the right spot to realize that this is even an option? I was floored by the design choice. This is peak environmental trolling to me. At this point, nothing made sense, and I just wanted to go home. Needless to say, almost all of the locations in this game are just as evil and menacing as the bosses that await you at the end of their dungeons. I actually think that as I progressed and leveled up, the bosses became less the issue. Like I had mentioned, most of the fights can be won with 1, sometimes 2 summons. Most bosses are relatively slow and easy to telegraph. There are definite standouts in terms of unique fights and tough bosses though. Let me go over the standouts. Flexile Sentry is a pushover with friends. Apparently, while the battle is going on, the room is flooding with water, making moving over time a chore. If I had done this alone, I probably would have had more struggle, but from a design choice, I do like the idea of the rising water adding tension to the fight. Too bad Flexile is a pushover. Smelter Demon, on the other hand, is no pushover. I needed help with the summon so bad in this fight, as Smelter hits like a truck, has massive swing distance, and can jump across the room and land right on top. With his second phase adding flames and explosions into the mix, I needed my trusty summon just to act as distraction. Old Dragon Slayer makes an appearance in this one as one of the few fights where I could not summon assistance, so this felt like a true to form Souls fight. One-on-one, just you and the Old Dragon Slayer. His moves were fair and fast, and he left lots of chances to be punished. It took a few tries, but he went down without too much of a fuss. I did enjoy the fight though. Some unique fights included the Executioner's Chariot fight. Remember those adorable chariots in Elden Ring that just straight up ran you down with nowhere to go? Well, meet their older, deader brother. Deader's a word, right? This fight was fun for a gimmick fight. The first part has you running around the arena, roll dodging through the chariot's spike wheels while he endlessly tries to run you down. You need to duck into these small alcoves along the way for safety. There are 2 necromancers who are bringing the skeletons back to life. You need to kill the 2 necromancers, pull the switch at the end, close the gate, and destroy the chariot. After that, the fight ends with you battling the undead horse who was pulling the chariot. The horse isn't a pushover either. A few well-placed kicks or smashes and it's over. I enjoyed this fight a lot and actually found it interesting that this isn't even a mandatory fight. He's totally optional. The Lost Sinner is another standout. He's fast and unruly. This fight is done in a virtually pitch-black arena as well. But if you manage to light the flames before in the Bastille prison on either side, then the arena is lit up, making it more possible for a win. Having a summon friend also helps here, as he tends to be quite aggressive, and having someone take his aggro even for a few seconds helps tremendously. For some reason, the Demon of Song gave me the most trouble. Bonus points to this boss for its just strange design. What the hell even is that thing? A giant demon head and hand stuffed inside a rubbery body of a giant frog? This one is just weird. And the way he sings that angelic song gives me the creeps.
Always, she's already drawing me to her with her beautiful siren song. That's very disturbing.
Adding a summon friend to this fight actually felt like it was a punishment, as they tended to force him to hide inside his frog suit, making it impossible to hit him. Anytime he did come out, I wasn't around to hit him, so I'd miss every chance to do damage. Then his moveset would just steamroll me. I saw countless people say how easy he was, but for some reason, this guy gave me a ton of trouble. I ended up beating him solo as I needed him to really only focus on me. I will give props to FromSoft though for this completely unconventional design. He just looks so weird. Nearing the end of the game, you're met with a gauntlet of bosses, like Volstad, who again, has to be a one-on-one fight. No summoning here, so you actually have a bit of a skill check. Then there's Twin Dragon Riders, a duel fight, always fun, never cheap. Summon friend, you are the best. Then there's the Throne Watcher and Throne Defender. Did I mention the duel fights? And how they're never cheap? Well, at least you have your good old summon buddies. These fights were tolerable with only a few attempts, but again, I did almost all of them with summon companions, because the game offers it. I'm certain they intended for you to do it with them. To do it without summons is your own difficulty challenge. This brings us to the end boss, for me, Nishandra. She's a solid final boss. She has strong death curse moves and a lot of range. I really found I had to take my time and look for openings, or else her floating curse balls would insta-kill me. It was also nice for FromSoft to allow me to fight her on multiple attempts without forcing me to refight the previous Throne Watcher and Defender. Small victories. Apparently, depending on the responses you gave to a recurring character, Aldea, he would then move in after Nishandra was defeated and claim the spot of the true final boss. However, for some reason, probably due to my answers earlier, he did not appear at the end of my playthrough, so I cannot say what his fight was like. It wouldn't be fair to talk about bosses without at least mentioning some of the DLC bosses. Now, I did fight Alana, Squalid Queen. This fight was bullshit, let me tell you. Her first phase is nothing to write home about. Standard fare. Get in close, smack away, and just dodge away from her swings. She has some magic attacks, but most can be dodged no problem. The real issues arrive on her second phase, when she can summon forth random enemies to the battlefield to assist her. If you're lucky, you can land on the ever-helpful 3 pigs. Yep, she summons 3 small, pathetic pigs that pose 0 threat. Once you kill the units, she'll then summon more, so your best bet is to keep one alive and ignore it. However, I was never that lucky. She'll also summon 3 skeletons. More annoying, of course, but you can pretty much one-shot them away. Not advised, as you need one to stay up to prevent her from summoning again. The third option, and the one that seemed to be always what I got, is a summoned version of Velstadt. She literally summons another late game main boss into the arena, and you just have to deal with it. Even with a summon companion of my own, when Velstadt was summoned, I almost always lost. Because while she's in her second phase, she can also teleport anywhere and becomes more aggressive, teleporting right on top of you and landing huge blows. Up until this point, this was far and away the hardest fight I had encountered in the game. It's RNG based, she teleports with no apparent cooldown, and has AoE attacks that can one-shot you from across the room. I tried this fight way more than any other fight in Dark Souls 2. This fight nearly broke me, but I did finally beat her when the stars aligned and I got skeletons in the final battle. After her is a quaint little fight against a poison dragon who was, well, fun and easy. With 2 summons to aid me, I enjoyed this fight far more than Alana. This fight felt fair and vast and had a cool arena. His poison fire breath wasn't too hard to avoid, so it just felt fair. It was almost like a nice surprise dessert after being forced to eat one of your most hated meals. This DLC also has one of the most hilariously impossible gank fights in any Souls game. I only got through it because I myself was able to summon 2 friends to help, taking the fight from a 3v1 to a 3v3. Even still, you fight a variation of Havel, another doppelganger of yourself, and a fencing bow user who stands back and takes pot shots at you and your team from afar. First time I got in there, I was so creamed I just laughed. This couldn't possibly be real. But yet it was. I had learned to master the boss run back with precision, making sure I had my 2 friends right in tow. After a few tries, I actually did this one, and the worst part is, I don't think the reward was even that good. Fume Knight in the other DLC was a standout, an all-time great if you will, an almost perfect boss fight in the Souls universe. He's huge and scary and can mess you up big time. But he also has a moveset that makes it feel like a dance. These are the best kind of fights in Souls games. Alas, he was just kicking my ass so bad that I had to use a summon. And then, even with a summon, I was getting wrecked. This brought me to the moment I had never done in any other Souls game to date, including Elden Ring. I used a summon sign to bring in a real-life player to help me fight this boss. It was amazing that there's still people out there so many years after this game has come out, waiting and helping players like me take on the challenge. It took us 2 tries, and he was nice enough to stick around for both. It was awesome to be able to experience the joy of using a summon sign for another random player to beat the boss. This is what playing these games is all about. The endlessly helpful community members who just want to see everyone succeed. Thank you, good sir. You have proven that there is joy to be had in these games. Wow, what a long script this has turned out to be. If you stayed at this point, I think you can probably assume where my verdict lands on Dark Souls 2 being the hardest in the Souls game. So let's recap. I have completed Elden Ring, Erdtree DLC, Bloodborne, Hunter DLC, Dark Souls 3 and its 2 DLCs, and Dark Souls 2, and 2 out of the 3 DLCs. I didn't do the winter one because I saw the nasty, awful environmental nonsense, and I just said, no thanks. But I digress. As of now, to date, Dark Souls 2 is the hardest one for many reasons. Overall, its bosses are varied, but when they get tough, they get almost impossible. The healing mechanic and punishment for Estus use is a massive factor. The actual controls and joystick's response hinder the player like never before, and the environments are some of the most rage-inducing troll fests I have ever seen in a Dark Souls game. Yes, Radon Consort and Millennia are still the toughest bosses, but overall I feel like Dark Souls 2 might be the toughest game, which is why I'm so glad I ignored everyone on the internet who says this is a skip. If anything, Dark Souls 2 is mandatory, so that you can see how truly rough these games can get and how truly awesome it feels when you finally beat it. If you disagree, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And with that, thank you for watching my Dark Souls 2 retrospective. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't already. My journey through self-inflicted torture continues with my completion of Dark Souls 1 Remaster. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys on the next one.